if my two daughters were here and they saw me speaking to a room this size, I think they'd say something like along the lines of, "Wow, that's pretty cool." AT&T is obvious. But we actually have a large global presence. We have nodes around the world, and we're in most countries in Europe. In fact, we have a Romanian presence. Today, following up Jackie's comments, I'd like to focus on broadband, and I thought I'd use my time to describe the state of play of the broadband marketplace, and then the broadband policy perspective in the U.S. So as Jackie noted, I think in her presentation, in the U.S. there's been tremendous investment in broadband over the last decade, and we've had significant results from that investment. As you can see from some of these statistics, in 1999 we had fewer than 3 million broadband connections. As of 2007, we had over 120 million connections when you factored in wireless. Similarly, at the beginning of the decade, we only had around 6% of broadband adoption, and as Jackie noted, we are now up to around 63% of households. Broadband is obviously a capital-intensive industry, whether you're talking about fixed networks or wireless networks. So we've invested tremendous sums in the U.S., generally private investment in these networks. And a couple salient features of this investment I think that are worth pointing out is that broadband and ICT investment in general has really been a driver of productivity for the economy. As you can see, it's driven 1/3 or more of the productivity growth of the last decade. And another point that's more relevant to the economy today is relative to other sectors in the U.S., investment in broadband and in communications networks has actually increased during the recession. It's been at a slower pace, obviously, but we've actually had continuing increased investment during this downturn. AT&T specifically is a big player in this market. We've invested significant sums ourselves, some $38 billion over the last 2 years, and we plan to invest $17 to $18 billion this year, even with the recession. We invest both in wired and wireless solutions. Really, 3G has been a huge focus of the company over the last couple of years, and we've been feverishly investing in that network. We are the exclusive provider of the iPhone in the U.S., which has presented a lot of opportunities for us, but as I'll show you later, a few challenges as well. This slide sums up some of the same things I just talked about, but again, AT&T has been investing a lot of money in this market. And as Jackie alluded to in her comments, while there's been tremendous investment, while companies have been driving deployment and growth in broadband, the U.S. has recognized that there still remains significant challenges in the broadband marketplace. In particular, we have a coverage gap. There are a significant number of customers, somewhere in the range of 6%, as Jackie noted, 6 to 10% of people who are in hard-to-serve areas, and they currently do not have a terrestrial broadband solution. They may have a satellite solution, but they currently do not have a terrestrial solution. A number of households don't have computers, which is a driver of broadband demand. And a number of folks have chosen not to subscribe, even though broadband is available to them. And this seems to be one of the more vexing problems that the government is focused on. And as I note here, there are actually subpopulations, senior citizens, people that have less than a high school education, low-income folks, minority folks, and people who live in rural areas who have more acute problems or more acute issues with accessing broadband. One thing that's worth noting, however, is there's been some surveys done that show that price is not the primary reason people aren't subscribing. The issue of relevancy to them has been a big issue. And as Jackie noted in her slides, the FCC has preliminarily concluded that it will take somewhere in the range of $20 billion to $350 billion, depending upon how big of a network you want to scale, to have ubiquitous broadband in the U.S. So it's a significant equation. So I just want to touch briefly on the two areas where the U.S. is diving into the broadband policy issues. One is more of a short-term area, which is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, i.e. our stimulus bill. The other is the FCC's longer-term national broadband plan. As you can see, the stimulus plan allocated $7.2 billion for investment in broadband projects. I've laid out some of the goals here. The FCC's broadband plan is, as I said, a longer-term solution, looking at what can the government do along with the private sector to really make sustainable investment in broadband. So let me quickly touch on our position, AT&T's position on these two programs. With regard to the stimulus program, which is being overseen by the United States Commerce Department, we recommended kind of 6 major themes. We're still, I would start off by saying the Commerce Department in the U.S. is in the process of implementing this program. They have written some rules so far, but they haven't allocated any money yet. We expect some initial decisions next month, and then there'll probably be another round of funding in the spring. And when all is done, they will have allocated $7.2 billion. Their goal number one, unlike the National Broadband Plan, is to ensure that they stimulate the economy and they drive jobs. So in order to do that, at AT&T, we recommended 6 major themes. One, we said to prioritize grants to anchor institutions. What we mean by that are schools, community hospitals, libraries, and what have you. We thought that those are the best institutions that know what they need immediately, and that investment in these larger institutions can actually drive demand and supply at the same time into the community. We also recommended that they focus on, when they give grants to providers, that they focus really on the unserved areas, not on the areas that may be where deployment has already occurred, because the problem number one to solve is really getting those folks that do not have broadband covered. I won't go through all of these, but we did make a number of these recommendations. It's still unclear exactly how the Commerce Department will implement these in doling out the money. They received over 2,200 applicants in this first round, seeking a total of, I think, over $25 billion. So they only have $4 billion to allocate this first round, and we will see what they do with it. Let me touch briefly on the FCC's role in broadband. They have been given the pen by the United States government to write the National Broadband Plan. I think the challenge for the FCC is to think big and beyond its traditional scope of regulation, while they need to remain cognizant of their limitations. There's not a lot of public funds available at the moment, certainly on a scale of $20 to $350 billion to fund this, so they really need to harness the investment that I mentioned above of the private sector. The private sector has been driving broadband to the lion's share of people in the U.S., and they need to figure out ways to push that investment even further. And I won't repeat kind of our guiding principles that we recommended for the FCC's plan, but we were pushing the FCC, again, to think big and to think beyond their traditional area of expertise. I'm going to conclude my remarks by giving an illustration of what I think of the opportunities and challenges we face by focusing briefly on mobile broadband. As you can see from this slide, wireless broadband is growing at a truly astounding rate. The first graph shows you that over the last 3 years, data traffic on AT&T's network has grown by 5,000%. Many of this growth